Good evening. My name is Stefano Sani. I am Associate Principal and Design Director with Hickok Cole Architects in Washington, D.C. And tonight, this evening, we are presenting the concept for the building form of the Wells Fargo and Verizon site in Clarendon, Arlington. So let's start with the presentation. Let me share the screen. And here we go. So as we said, we are discussing now the Wells Fargo Verizon site, which is located right there in the middle of the slide along Washington Boulevard, North Irving Street and North Hudson Street. It's currently occupied by a surface parking lot and the Wells Fargo Bank, and it sits at the major intersection between Washington Boulevard, Wilson Boulevard and Clarendon Boulevard. To the south of it, we have the Verizon infrastructure and Verizon office building. The next slide, we see what could be the typical building form, just following strictly the design guidelines of the Clarendon sector plan, with the step back on the, in this case, third floor. It could be between the second and the fifth. And the step back is 20 feet deep, and then we have a tower above the podium itself. Given the uniqueness of the site, we believe that we could approach the building form in a slightly different way, trying to accomplish a more interesting concept. The site itself is indeed potentially a gateway, right, for Clarendon and Arlington, as it sits at the confluence of Clarendon Boulevard, Wilson Boulevard, and Washington Boulevard, and can act as a terminus, like a counterpart for the major public open space, which is the Clarendon Central Park. If we go to the next slide, we can therefore start sharing with you the geometry of the footprint of the proposed building. This is oriented to the north, is similar to the picture of the site we were looking at before. So Washington Boulevard, North Irving, and North Hudson. The concept for the building itself is to create a podium, which in this case would go up to the third floor. At the third floor, a number of things happen. What we show in this slide is how we intend to articulate the building, the footprint of the tower above the podium, to create a stronger presence at the intersections, and at the same time to create a deep step back in the middle of the elevations, of the main elevations on the north side, the west side, and the south side. How does this approach comply with the design guidelines? So first of all, the proposed concept complies with the build to lines of the sector plan, as well as with the maximum height limits. Same thing for the streetscape and the sidewalk width. What we instead propose is a modified approach to the step back guidelines of the sector plan itself. In which way? If you can look at this side of this slide, in red, we are identifying the portions of the footprint of the tower which go beyond what would be the typical step back build to line indicated by the sector plan. In blue, instead, we indicate where the footprint is offering a deeper step back compared to the indications of the guideline. And as we said before, the intent of this is to achieve a much more interesting articulation of the building, which will create a stronger presence on the intersections, as well as a deep interplay of voids and solids and shadows and lights to articulate the main front of the buildings, creating also a relief and the counterpart, almost like a book-ending approach to the Central Park public space, as well as the public plaza planned on North Irving Street and on the proposed 10th Road North that we can see in this case here. It would be certainly helpful to see a three-dimensional representation of this concept. To the left, we see what the building could look like if we just simply mechanically adopted a compliance approach, right, to the guidelines for the step backs. So we have a very clean composition, but possibly not as engaging or as interesting in terms of articulations of the fronts. To the right, instead, we can see how the proposed building offers a sequence of volumes for the towers, which can create a very, very strong interest for the skyline, but also for the pedestrian scale. As you can see on North Irving Street, the podium is stepping down. There's a kind of a sequence of cascading terraces from the top to the bottom, which creates a strong relationship with the proposed public plaza. While instead on Washington Boulevard, the scale of the open space in front of Washington Boulevard certainly is compatible with the scale of the articulation of the tower above. Same considerations apply when we look down North Irving Street. So we're looking south in this case. To the left is the proposed building for the Wells Fargo. To the right, instead, the proposed massing for the diner site. And we can see indeed how to the left we have the typical possible step back configuration for according to the guidelines. And this is the interpretation of the cascading sequence of volumes to establish a strong relationship with the public plaza and avoid the canyon effect, probably in a more effective way than in the image on the left. If we go to the next image, we see a view looking north along North Irving Street. Again, to the left, we have the possible configuration of the building following the guidelines, and then we have the proposed massing for the site of the diner. To the right, we have the proposed concept for the Wells Fargo Verizon building with the articulation of the front and a bigger relief also on 10th Road North. It's also interesting if you go to the next slide to see how the programming of the building itself will contribute to activating the street frontage with the retail along Washington Boulevard and North Irving Street with the bank itself, which will be relocated here. Also, the configuration of the step that we see here is also partially due to the need to build the bank first and then build the rest of the building after. So this setback is also functional to that necessary phasing approach. Then we also see the programming for the upper second and third floor, which is going to be an office program, which will potentially create an interesting activity during the day on the terrace, which is going to be outdoor amenity for the office itself and can be used for the lunch break of the people working in the office, creating almost like an interesting outdoor living room counterpart, right, to the public plaza below. And we want to complete the presentation with this comparison again between the possible typical clean step back configuration and the more engaging one that we offer in the concept, which is in our eyes achieving even a stronger implementation of the principles of the sector plan, where we can read that special building elements and expressions such as towers and special entries should be used strategically at street intersections and vista terminations to provide interest along the block, add interest in the skyline, and create a human scale. And we totally believe that this site is a strategic site and is certainly a site with vista terminations value. So we propose this modification to summarize, to modify and replace the continuous step back with the modulated ones, and specifically 2 localized reductions of the step back depth at the corners along Washington Boulevard, 1 localized reduction of the step back depth at southwest corner on North Irving Street, and then we compensate this with an increased depth step back on the central portion of the elevations along Washington Boulevard, North Irving, and 10th Road North in the back. So by, again, reaffirming that this is a concept that intends to reaffirm and reinforce the implementation of the principle of the sector plan, we thank you for your attention, and we hope to be able to share the next steps of the project with you pretty soon. Thanks again.